Good morning. As we start off November the 5th, 2 days post-election day, we still don't have a president of the United States come January 20th. However, we'll try to update that as much as we can. This would have been a great time to have some real good discussion if we're in school. My Google Meet the other day had a pretty decent discussion on, hey, why is everything going on like it's happening? But being not in school, I feel like we're missing out with that just a little bit. However, today in class, what we're going to be doing is going over your homework assignment that you did for me. And as we do that, we are going to kind of get you ready for a test tomorrow. I guess it's an open book. I'll be scanning those things in and getting you ready for that test on Friday. So first thing today, this book was kind of, I guess there was an easier version on how to read it. If I can open up another tab here, it might help. Because the book also gave you kind of where the answers were based on what the question was. So the first question was, whom did the farmers in the late 1800s blame for their troubles? We found out that we could find all that information here in the introduction. So the introductory paragraph, get back to it quickly. So introduction gives you, the introduction paragraph is the farmers organized there. So as it breaks it down in outline form, it kind of gives you a where to find this information. So if we happen to do one of these in the future, which we probably will, you'll be a little bit better off. So first thing, whom did the farmers in the late 1800s blame for their troubles? They were kind of against big companies, so Eastern manufacturers. And the reason that they blamed them was because they were charging high prices for their goods, and the less they sold, they weren't making any money on that. The banks is somebody also that they blamed, and the reason that they were blaming the banks was because they had a high interest rate, so they had to buy stuff on credit and hope that their profit at the end of harvest season, they were going to make quite a profit. However, they still had house payments and everything else. But the last place that they blamed, even though this was our savior, was the railroad. And in addition to other minor complaints, these were the three big ones that they kind of blamed for their troubles. And as the railroad was the one who was going to ship their goods to market, they blamed them because of the high prices they were charging. And they were charging them different rates based on kind of who they were. Farmers couldn't help out the railroad very much. But oil companies and steel manufacturers, they got a discount on railroad cars, while the farmers had to pay a high rate. Number two, how did the farmers contribute to the, how did the banks contribute to the farmers' plight? That is kind of what we mentioned. The high interest rate was going to almost kind of bankrupt the especially the small farmer, and having to pay those high interest rates, even though they may have gotten cashed in with the Homestead Act, they could have gotten free land, but the bank was going to charge them a very high rate, so they weren't really making very much money. And then they have a bad crop or two, the bank could come in and take their house. So this was all part of the farmers on the plains. This is the people that feed us. However, they were going to try their best to kind of organize together. The next major point is B. So if we click back to B here, it says the Grange Farmers Alliances. So it kind of goes over again in outline form where we got this. So on the paragraph, the Grange, that's where we'd find our answer to this one in case you were having trouble. How did the National Grain try to encourage economic self-sufficiency among farmers? So they had a couple of ways that they could do this. They wanted to bypass the Eastern manufacturers and set up cash only cooperatives. And I kind of think of these as like farmers markets. Um, that way the farmer is selling right to the individual consumer as opposed to the middleman, the Eastern manufacturers that's charging a high rate. The other thing that they kind of came up with, they offered education. And just because you go out there, how deep do you plant the corn and how wide are the rows? These are things that farmers, they maybe got free land and they're willing to take a risk out west, but they didn't really have a great handle on what things worked well. The last thing that they were going to try to help out each other was fellowship. So being able to talk to each other in different areas. Some techniques may work better, but farmers were relatively out on their own out west. So bringing them together, giving them a chance to kind of work things out together was a big part of the Grange. The next thing, we kind of hit on this a second ago, the railroad was going to contribute to the decline of the Grange because of high prices. And charging those high prices, clicked out of this thing here, hold on. It would be difficult for the farmers to make any money, and they would charge them at kind of an unfair rate. Farmers alliances, if we're looking as we're reading here, can't zoom in very well, but the farmers alliances is our next paragraph here, and that's also where it says we'll find our next answer. So what were the farmers alliances? So as we read through here, they were a network of self-help organizations, again designed at helping farmers and getting them kind of somebody on their team out there, because they're out there on 160 acres maybe all by themselves, and this kind of helped them do some things that they couldn't do on their own. How did the alliances try to change and reduce the power of the railroads, the banks, and the merchants over farmers? So reducing the power that banks and railroads and merchants had over farmers, they came up and proposed this plan. They were going to do the self-help organization things, the cash-only cooperatives. But one thing that would kind of control the price was to set up a system of kind of government loans and have the government store crops in warehouses. And this was going to help the farmers because there was if there was a lot of rain that year, the price of corn would plummet because everybody had a good crop. And conversely, if there was a bad crop year, the price would go really high. So this was going to be a way that they could regulate how much they had, building those silos. That's kind of what they had these types of things in the future. But this was a way that the farmers would be able to pay back government loans and therefore reducing the power that the railroads had on these farmers, because they're shipping their stuff off hundreds of miles sometimes and using the railroad, where the government was and other parties involved would kind of store those crops a little bit closer. The next major paragraph there, it says the populist party. Looks like it's on the next page, so let's go to the next page here. So the party of the people is what they call the populist party. We're going to have to open this a little bit better here. You can move those things over. There we go. So in 1890, the alliances became active in political campaigns, it says in the very first sentence. And I think what it said, when was the Populist Party formed, is in the next paragraph. If you can see through my bullet points. It says 1892. They ran somebody for president, but 1890 is when it was found. whom did the Populist Party nominate for president? His name was James B. Weaver. No relation to Mr. Weaver, I don't think. But he was from Iowa in 1892. He's going to run for president. He received more than 1 million votes, which was pretty big on this party. So they kind of were disillusioned with the two-party system. Kind of like we see some voters freaking out right now. Well, it wasn't just Democrats, it wasn't just Republicans. This third party came in and was pretty accurate. How did the southern state legislatures strike a blow against populism? And this is under the free silver paragraph here. And this had to do with who was going to vote for them. So the states in the Deep South put strict limits on African American voting rights. So by doing this, those African Americans would have supported people like this, the People's Party they called themselves. In 1896, a guy from Centralia, Illinois, William Jennings Bryan, was nominated. He got the nickname of the Great Commoner. And the reason he got this nickname because he was, just a regular, common person, and very emphatically gave a kind of a famous Heart of Gold speech. However, being the kind of oddball out candidate, I looked at several of the answers to the next question there. Why did William McKinley win the election? Well, yes, he got more votes, and yes, he won the Electoral College, but it was he was the more, I guess, polished candidate. And during the campaign, he looked like the more stable guy, so he added stability to government. The legacy of the Populist Party, and these are three things that they fought for in their time that was aimed at helping the little people in society, like having an 8-hour workday. And the law is now after your 8 hours is up, you get to maybe get overtime after you work 40 hours a week. Now, it didn't happen in their lifetime, and the Populist Party has kind of waned today. But this was one of their things. They also, in an effort to stop a very large tax on everything, they wanted an income tax, which would later be the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, which we'll talk about later. But this was going to prevent everybody from paying a flat tax, if you will, and having a graduated income tax on everything, on everybody's income, would collectively take a little bit more money from the rich people and help pay for some government programs. And finally, the last thing, after the 8-hour workday, they also wanted to abandon the gold standard. So abandoning the gold standard is going to, the farmers thought, put more money into circulation. They kind of crazily had this idea where they just print a bunch of silver and give it to these people. And we know from previous discussion when we're in class that if you just print a bunch of money, what happens to it? That's right, the value goes down. And if it's very common, then it doesn't have a lot of value to it, and your purchasing power goes down. So be looking for a test for tomorrow over Chapter 18. Have a good rest of the day. Keep watching the polls. We'll talk to you soon.